it can be very, very tempting to just get really, really excited about some new thing that you're looking forward to and ignore all of its faults and just say that it's the best thing ever. Well, that's nearly a fault that I have fallen into with the recent announcement for Konflikt47, which I am very much looking forward to. But a few people have pointed out one particular, shall we say, issue at the moment that some people have with this release, and that is to do with the price. And the idea that these models, all of these nice new Konflikt47 models, are a bit too expensive. Well, I am looking forward to Konflikt47, and so I should be able to look at that and judge, or at least kind of trick myself into considering, are the prices actually fair? And I can compare them to some other companies and see how they stack up. And I fully encourage everyone to get into the comments and have a great big blazing row about this, because kind of the opinion on value of plastic model kits is massively subjective, and even the cheapest of them are massively overpriced. The cost of manufacture is nothing, the cost of transport is very small, and the cost of design when divided between hundreds of thousands of units is negligible. But let's get stuck in to the Konflikt47 releases, and this page, which I have looked at a lot myself and I think has been in at least 3 videos so far, has all of the new stuff for Konflikt47. And we will skip over most of the things, but we will look at the only 2 units that are being sold separately, which is the Fireflies and the Stahltruppen there. And we'll look at the bundles, the Axis bundles, the core starter set, and then the expanded Axis and Allied bundles, as well as the mega bundle at the end. We'll save the biggest for the last. But first, let's have a quick look over the dice bags and the Rift dice, which are kind of a boring thing, and so I want to just shove them out of the way. This kind of mass-produced fabric little bag like this should not be £20. If I was at some convention and someone had hand-stitched this thing, then yes, that probably would be worth £20. And the Rift dice themselves, we always thought that the core order dice, especially as you need quite a few of them, are a little much, but the Rift dice are actually even more. There are 12 in each pack, and they are £18. That's £1.50 per die. Dice can get very expensive. I've seen some extremely expensive dice, and so that's not necessarily... It's a thing you only need to buy once, we hope. But we'll see about that, because we don't actually know how Rift dice are going to work in the game. Maybe 12 will do you for several armies, maybe you'll need to buy 2 or 3 boxes. I'm certainly not looking forward to having to buy more of these, because that would definitely suck. Right, so the thing we actually want to talk about in terms of pricing are the models themselves. We have 2 units that are being sold separately, even though we have a couple of other units like the Vogelspinner, the linebacker mech, and the, behind my webcam here, is the Nachtdalben, the Nightmares, the Stuart over here, the turret for the M5 Stuart. None of those are being sold separately. They're only available in bundle deals, which sucks. Not necessarily kind of the FOMO, but there is a name for it that I can't think of at the moment. But it's the idea that you'll be able to buy them separately in 6 months or so, or 3 months, or however long it might be. But right now, if you really want this thing, you have to buy the bundle and buy all of the other models that you don't necessarily want. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Kind of removing the options from people, which is not great. So let's move on to the first of the model kits that is sold separately, the Firefly troops. Now, I really like these, and I definitely want to paint up a few of them. The starter set, which I will be getting, has 12, I believe, but if you buy the full box, you get 18. So we've got 18 models down there for £37, which my immediate reaction is 37 for 18 models is rather a lot. So let's do a little bit of maths and do 37 divided by 18, £2 and 5p or 6p each. So they're coming in at £2 per model for plastic multi-part infantry. Now, if we have a look at sprue, lots of good stuff here, lots of options, especially lots of options for the legs, which is odd. If you could just like take off one of these legs and add in an extra torso, you would sell them at exactly the same price and have 7 models on the sprue. But no, there is 6 models on the sprue. It's the same size of sprue as Warlords' previous offerings for the historical armies and has similar kind of variety of many weapons. We've got many heads. We've got a couple of different hands and things. Although I will point out, the one thing that I really would like to see is a separate Thompson X. So the M1X1 Thompson here with the Tesla. They just look cool. I really like them, and I want one without the hands molded on, please. But no, there's not a single one on the sprue that doesn't have hands molded on. They've all got hands molded on. Rant aside. So if we've got plastic model kit here, a whole bunch of options, many different parts that you can build them in different ways. For £2 a model, can we have a look at some other companies' products and see what they're kind of selling equivalent kind of things? Infantry or fancy infantry at that kind of box of a bunch of them on plastic sprues with options kind of concept. And the first one that I want to point out is Mantic Games, kind of a direct rival for Warlord Games in many ways. And we have the GCPS Troopers, and I just picked one sort of at random. It seemed like this was a good comparison, as they are sci-fi infantry. These guys don't have a jump pack on them, but they do have a variety of weapons, they do have a variety of heads, and there are 20 of them in the box, and it's £25. So you're getting 2 more models than from Warlord Games in the Firefly troops, and you're spending £12 less, which seems to be like the GCPS troopers are a much better deal, to the point of being nearly half the price of the Warlord Games offering. We can of course look at some other historical stuff, like the Italian infantry that I got from War Games Atlantic, and we have £25 again, £25, but this time 32 models, which means they're just less than 80p each. And I think the quality of these is fine. You get plenty of heads, you get plenty of arms, you get a couple of different weapon options. There is a machine gun, there's even a separate sprue with an officer and a machine gun. Good stuff. But if we want to stick to science fiction, because this is historical and people will get a bit, oh, you can't compare historical stuff, blah blah blah. Let's go to War Games Atlantic sci-fi ranges and look at Le Grognard with their fancy hats and energy cannons and swords with chainsaws built into them that are definitely not chainswords. And they come on a sprue with just loads of options, different weapons, different heads, good kit bash ability. That's what we like to see. £25. How many do you get in them? 24 models now. So these are not historicals anymore. So we don't get the discount for being historical models. But 24 models for £25 means they're about £1 a model, which is actually very much the same as our Mantic Games offering. I have another one here that's slightly off screen. Wow, I'm good at this. The Dead Man's Hand gunfighters. There are 10 of them on a sprue, and it's £15, so they're £1.50 each. Once again, there's plenty of options on the sprues, loads of arms, different weapons, loads of heads, so we're looking at the same kind of thing. But of course, we should probably look at the giant elephant in the room that is Games Workshop, because we can't really get away from them. And I found quite a few different varieties of 10 models in a squad, 10 models in a box, with plastic kits, many heads, many weapons, lots of options. I've just picked the Orlok gang from Necromunda as an example, and these coming in at £31.50 for those 10 models, which means that these are £3 a model. So not only are these more expensive than the other options that I wanted to compare, they're more expensive than the Firefly troops from Warlord games, which is what we wanted to look at in the first place. And that's not necessarily surprising because Games Workshop are in the habit of ripping off their customers. In this case, it's not necessarily the rip-off prices that you can see from Games Workshop. Of note is that it's pretty consistent in Necromunda that the 10 model box of 10 humans is going to be $31.50 at the moment. I'm sure that price will go up any day now and make this video irrelevant. But there is another game in Games Workshop's vast collection that also has 10 models of roughly human shape and size, with various heads and weapons and all the other bits, and that is Kill Team. And Kill Team also has a consistent price, but the Kill Team price is not the same as the Necromunda price, and so all of the Kill Teams seem to be £42.50 for still 10 models with plastic, blown a plastic sprue, heads and weapons, blah blah blah. We're looking at comparative things here, and that's interesting because the Necromunda models and the Kill Team models are sculpted to the same standard. They're the same quality. They're produced in the same factory, we assume. Why is Kill Team £10 more expensive for what really should be the same kind of equivalent thing? I don't know. I can't answer that question. But just as an example, I've got the Sisters of Battle Novitiates here. £4.25 a model. So way more expensive. And we're still looking at just normal human shaped things here. We're not looking at bigger models. But what we can do is perhaps look at some bigger models, because the Stahltruppen here are quite a bit bigger than the Firefly Infantry, and they're quite a bit bigger than all of our human 28mm models that we've looked at before. Now, we haven't been shown in any of the documentation from Warlord games how tall these models actually are. Now, they are scaled for 28mm models, but that doesn't mean that they are 28mm tall. That means that that in the scale that they're in, a normal human, adult human, is going to be 28mm. But these guys are bigger than that. They're in the armor, so they're going to be taller than 28mm, but they are still existing in the same scale. And that leads me to only a few real comparisons that I know of. But let's look at the price of the Stahltruppen directly first, because it's quite simple to do in comparison to the Fireflies, because we have 9 models here for £37. So half as many as the Fireflies for exactly the same price, and that means that they are £4.10 each, and that is a big difference. In fact, that puts the Stahltruppen on the same price as Kill Team model, which is not great actually, but they are slightly bigger and you're only getting 3 of them per sprue. And if we look at the numbers of sprues between the Fireflies and the Stahltruppens, because you're getting the same number of sprues, but on the Firefly sprues you're getting 6 models, and on the Stahltruppen you're getting 3 models, half as many. And so in terms of the manufacturing cost, the number of sprues versus the price of the product as a whole, as a box, is the same. It's just that the number of models per sprue is different, and that's because the Stahltruppen are much bigger models. But the direct comparison that I can think of for big heavy infantry in powered armored suits is the Space Marines. It kind of has to be said that there's some Space Marines. Now, interestingly, the Firstborn Tactical Squad is £37 versus our Stahltruppen's £37. So we're looking at exactly the same cost, but you're getting 10 models in the Beaky Squad versus 9 in the Stahltroopers. So you're actually getting 1 extra of the Space Marine Firstborn compared to our Stahltroopers. But if we have a look at the sprues here, which are on display on Games Workshop's website, we actually see that there are 3 sprues, and they come with a vast assortment of options. We've got loads of different heads and different types of helmets. We've got all these different weapons, it kind of seems to be that Warlord Games have pushed their prices all the way up to the lofty heights of Games Workshop. However, if we remember that those Stahltruppen are actually on 40mm bases, and I don't remember where I heard that they're on 40mm bases, but because they've got the bases on the sprue, it seems to be that they wouldn't be 25s. There is a Games Workshop model that is a big heavy suit with a double-barreled machine gun as their primary weapon and heavy weapons and stuff that comes on a 40mm base. And what might that mean? The Terminator Squad. And this is a much newer kit. In fact, this is relatively recent, actually. And the Space Marine Terminators here are £42. So we've gone up a little bit. It's about £5 more. A little bit. It's like 10% more. But we've halved the number of models. So instead of getting 10 tactical beakies, we're only getting 5 Terminator beakies here. If we have a look at the sprues, again, plenty of options. Different shoulder pads, different weapons. We can actually see the armor, the torso is in 2 pieces, similar to the Firstborn and also the Stahltruppen. And so rather than comparing the Stahltruppen to the Firstborn, in terms of the size and the number of sprues and the number of models, it might be better to compare them to the Terminator Squad. At which point you suddenly realise, oh, actually the Stahltruppen are a much better deal, because for less money you're getting nearly twice as many. The Terminators are coming in at £8 a model and the Stahltruppen at £4 a model. Actually, the Terminators are £8.50 per model. And so what can we say about the price of the Fireflies and of the Stahltroopers? Because these are definitely more expensive models than Warlord Games usually puts out. They're more expensive than a lot of their competitors in terms of the other science fiction games that exist. And I haven't even mentioned, or I haven't even scratched the surface at the number of options out there. But they do seem to be still less in terms of their cost in comparison to Games Workshop, which is definitely a good thing, because Games Workshop are famous for being just overpriced. But just briefly talking about the quality, if I'm honest, these look very similar in terms of their quality, in terms of the sculpting, as the recent historical models from Warlord Games. The last few ones have been the Winter Fallschirmjäger, the Winter Brits, and the Winter US. There was also the D-Day Airborne, I think, is a new sprue as well. And they are all really nice kits. Good detail, nice and crisp. Great for painting. And again, all of the different weapons options in heads. And I don't think that these, just from the images of the sprues, I don't see these as being significantly better than what Warlord have put out. I think what they're doing is they're keeping the quality consistent, which is a good thing. But the fact that they've upped their price per sprue is questionable. So what do you think in the comments section below? Do you think that these are worth the slightly increased price? Are you quite happy that they're not quite up to Games Workshop prices? But they're certainly more than Mantic Games. They're more than Stargrave, for example, another science fiction game. And yes, there are, of course, more expensive models out there as well. I'm just looking for particularly the big squads of plastic infantry on sprues. But what I should also look at is not just the individual units, of which there are only 2, as we mentioned, but I should look at the bundle deals. And I'll start that off with the Konflikt47 starter set, because this is what I'm getting. I've already pre-ordered this, I'm making sure I'm getting that. And it's £95 and we get all of this stuff, which is cool. Firefly Infantry are present, the Stahltruppen are present, but they are not in the same numbers as if you buy them separately. If you buy them separately, you get 3 sprues each for 18 and 9, but in the starter set you get 2 sprues each, so you get 12 of the Firefly troops and 6 of the heavy infantry. Now if we cut a third off of the price of the separate box, from 37 to what would that be, 25-ish. You might consider that each of those are sort of worth £25 each, which interestingly is half the value of the box. And if we consider that the Spinnermech down here is kind of a light vehicle, we might consider this a light tank. And as Warlord games, and the Warlord games in Italian models are usually £25 for that small vehicle. Think your Matilda, think your M3 Stuart, that kind of thing. Your Chiha, and so on. You're looking at that kind of price, I would expect. And I think it is a fair comparison. I have looked on the sprues in other videos and assume that's at least roughly correct. We can see the linebacker as well. Now, the linebacker seems like a much bigger model, so we might actually be looking at an extra sprue just to physically fit all the pieces in. But if we just squish it down and pretend, because it might be the same number of sprues as the Vogelspinner, or it might be one extra, I don't actually know. Let's pretend that they're the same and they're equivalent, and that also is £25. Well, that means that just the models in the set, just kind of those four, match our price up here. And so all of the other stuff in here becomes the deal for buying the starter set as a bundle deal. So what we get is an officer for the Americans with the jump pack, and an officer for the Germans in the heavy armor. We get a bunch of terrain. We get the rule book, and if I scroll down and read the bits at the bottom, we get a couple of order dice, get a couple of the Rifts dice, and some other kind of wargaming paraphernalia as well. And that, I think, is really nice. Because buying the models by themselves seemingly is on that kind of slightly more expensive side of things. But if you look at the starter set as having all of this stuff in it for free, or kind of if you share out that price evenly, it brings down the price of those models a little bit and makes it a little bit better to swallow. And what you might actually consider is that rather than thinking of these as £25, which is what I just did, think of them as 20. So 20, 20, 20 and 20, totals 80. You've got £15 left, and you're paying £15 for the book, the terrain, and the two officer models. And that seems much more reasonable than what we were looking at before for the prices of these models separately. And that is one of many reasons why I've chosen specifically to go for the starter set rather than some of the other deals. But let's have a look at some of the other deals, because my kind words might run out. So if we look at the starter armies for both sides, and there are some very strong similarities between these two. So we have one sprue, 3 models of Stahltruppen in the Axis one, and one sprue, 6 models of the Fireflies in the American ones. And that doesn't seem like much. That's just a tiny little bit. Oh, hold up. Hold up 1 minute. There's actually 12. They've changed it. Interesting. Okay, so I'll just look at the Axis starter army then, and let's consider, in the same way that I split up the price of the starter set, let's split up the price of this kind of the starter army. So we've got 5 elements. We've got the 3 Stahltruppen, we've got the 5 Nachtalben, the Nightmares, we've got Spinnermech, the big Panzer IV mech, and then we've also got the officer here in the armour. So if you take your £110 and split that between 5, you get £22.50. And that's definitely not worth it for the 3 guys here, because they were only £4 each, which would be 12, and the character's certainly not worth 25. We said that the Panzer mech, the little one, might be considered to be 25 if it's the same kind of equivalent to a lot of the small tanks that Warlord Games puts out. I think what we're actually considering as the biggest part here is the Panzer IV mech, which arguably is 2 separate kits, because you get the plastic Panzer IV with the tracks and the original turret, and then you get another kind of add-on upgrade part, which is all the legs in resin and this extra turret. And at that point, you start to see why it is as expensive as it is, because you're having kind of this one model is 2 kits worth of price going into it. And so overall, this doesn't necessarily seem like a particularly good deal. But looking at the Americans, especially now that they've added in those extra models, this definitely seems worth it. Because if we do the same thing, if we take our £100 and split that 5 ways to make 20 something pounds each, the Tesla Stuart, definitely worth that, because that's a plastic kit with a resin upgrade. The 12 Fireflies is about £2 a model, which is kind of what they were priced at if you buy them separately, so we're not getting any discount on them necessarily if we consider it this way. The Officer by himself certainly isn't worth 25, but if we look at the 2 linebacker mechs, 2 of them, not one of them. It was originally 1 linebacker mech, but now they've added in a second one, as well as adding in more Firefly troops. And that makes this starter army, the American starter army, a much nicer deal. But there is something that I can compare these starter armies to, because several other companies have games of science fiction models where they bundle them up so that you can buy the starting point of an army or maybe a whole army in one go. And the fact that these two have the options they do makes it kind of an interesting thing to compare. And the first one I should look at, as you might expect, as we've mentioned a few times, is Games Workshop and the combat patrols. And the combat patrols, unlike when we looked at Kill Team, when we looked at Necromunda, they're all 10 models each. The combat patrols have a vastly different number of models in each. And some of them, even though they're the same price, some of them, for that £100, you're getting as low as 12 models, and that's kind of disgusting. And that's not vehicles, that's not big models, that's not monsters, that's not huge gribbly things. That's 12 like Space Marines for £100. That's not okay. But something like the Tau box set, which I have up here, the Tau Combat Patrol, I think this not only is a much better deal, but it's also a better comparison for us to have a look at, because we have a big tank, just happens to be a flying tank, that's cool. We have a big stompy walkie thing, which is, I would say, roughly the size of one of the smaller mechs. So it's sort of equivalent to a Vogelspinner. Maybe it isn't. Maybe that's an unfair comparison, but it's close. Hopefully you can see where I'm going with this comparison. And then we have, I think it's 20 infantry. Yes, it's 10 Fire Warriors and 10 Pathfinders. 2 squads of 10 of slightly different infantry. I don't play Tau. I don't know what they mean. I think the Fire Warriors are the basic infantry and the Pathfinders are a common specialist unit. They're not like super special forces or anything. But also in the set you are getting a few of these drones as well, which do count as models. Not that one. That one. That one there. And that one there. They are drones that clip into the tank, which is cool. So we've got big vehicle, little vehicle, 2 squads of 10, and some extras. So if we look at the Axis Army box, big vehicle, little vehicle, squad of 5, squad of 3, and commander. And it's £10 more. So this starter army is actually worse price. It's not as good a deal as one example of the Games Workshop combat patrols. And again, like I mentioned, there's quite a few combat patrols that are dire for the price. £100 should not go for so few models. But I think that the Axis starter army is also just not that good a deal. And then we come back to the Americans, and once again, this is a much better deal and we can be much happier about this. Compare this to our Tau. Big vehicle, small vehicle, 2 squads of 10. big vehicle, another big vehicle, and a little vehicle. 12 infantry, not 20, so there's less in the Fireflies, and the officer. I think this is a very good comparison, and even though we're spending £10 more here, I think we're getting equivalent to it, certainly, and maybe even a bit more for the bit more price. It's probably roughly about the same. So when we compare the Konflikt 47 starter armies to one of the better 40k combat patrols, we can see that they're about even, sort of. In again, I'm comparing this in a very kind of specific way, and I hope you recognize that I am aware of how I'm comparing them, but that is a deliberate choice. But there are, of course, other companies that exist, shock horror, and we mentioned Mantic Games before, and so let's mention Mantic Games as well, because for just about £100, slightly less, you can buy the Getting Started boxes from Mantic Firefight, which is their science fiction battle game. And if anyone remembers the £50 challenge that I do occasionally, and I did one on Mantic Games, and I really liked the Forge Fathers, the Space Dwarfs. But we can have a look here at what do you get for the £95 in comparison to our Tau Combat Patrol, and in comparison to our Allied and American boxes for Konflikt 47. Because here we're getting a big vehicle and a little vehicle, a stompy robot thing, 3 squads of 10, that's 30 basic infantry, and they are pretty heavy armoured. And yes, I'm sure someone in the comments is going to be going, but they're dwarves, they're short, that means they're made of less plastic. Fine, we'll call them 25. It's still more than any of the others we've looked at. But not only are you getting the 30 Space Dwarf infantry here, you're also getting 6 specialist infantry in bigger armour, and a commander. And yeah, okay, the commander's tiny, little guy down here, but you're getting that. So in comparison, just in terms of the number of models, you're getting way more out of Mantic Games than you are out of Games Workshop, and you're still getting more than even the American starter set. But it doesn't end there, because even though this is £95 and therefore cheaper than the others and has more models in it, you're also getting the rulebook. That's the rulebook for Firefight that comes in the starter army. And you're getting these dice, and these dice, and these dice, and these dice. You're getting the dice you need to play, because Firefight does use a bunch of sort of crazy dice. But then so does Bolt Action with its Order dice, and now the Konflikt 47 with its Rift dice. So the fact that the starter army includes all of this stuff, it pretty much means you need a table, a tape measure, and an opponent. Go have some. And so I think these are very much overlooked. And that's not just because I think, just look at that thing. Look at that tank. It just looks cool. I love it. And now that I've had a look at all of these other options, some of those combat patrols were really bad, but the Tau one was one of the better ones, and the Tau beats the Axis. I don't think it beats the Americans. I think it's kind of equivalent, but I think that the Forge Fathers from Mantic Games beats the Americans. But there are more bundle deals, as we saw at the beginning, because not only are there the starter armies, there is the starter army plus. We have Warlords. I'm not sure how that is pronounced for the Axis. It is pronounced Vorwärts, as in the German word for forwards. And we have the Good to Go bundle for the Americans. So these are £207 and include the starter army for each. Let's just check to make sure. Yep, we've got the extra linebacker and the extra Firefly infantry for the Americans. So they are exactly the same starter army plus a few extras. And the plus a few extras is the same between the two. We get a full box of the Stahltruppen and the Fireflies. We get a dice bag, we get a hardback rulebook, and the 1/2 of the special edition reloading diorama. The equivalent half to the army side that you're buying. And these numbers start to seem a little bit annoying to me, because the dice bag is 20 quid, the rulebook is 40 quid, so that's 60, and these guys, full box of from both sides, is 37, And so that's £97 plus the reloading model, which however much you want to value that as, £5 or £10 maybe. I would say 5, but I'm sure someone will say that it's a limited edition model, therefore it should be more, or it should be considered more because of exclusivity. But we've added, to go from 110 to 207, we've added £95. So you are buying all of the bits and then getting the officer as the bundle deal. That's it. You are only getting this one model for the price of this bundle deal. And same for the Americans. You're only getting this model as the reward for buying this bundle. I think I'd just stick with the separate army. Certainly the American one is a good deal. Adding all these extra stuff is essentially just the retail price of them. And I don't think the dice bag is worth £20, as we mentioned at the very beginning. So I don't think these are very good deals. If you at home actually think that these are a good deal for some other reason, have I missed something? Have I not considered something that's included in here? Or am I just being unfair? I don't know, but these do not seem like a good deal. We can then go up to the all-in bundle for both the Axis and the Americans, and these are both £265, and they contain the separate starter army, the dice bag, the rulebook, half of the limited edition diorama, and up here the full starter set. So if we add up the price of these different things, we know that's 110, we know that's 95, so 205, rulebook's 40, 245, the dice bag is 20, it's 265. Oh hey look, once again we're at exactly the same price as this, and the only thing you're getting extra is the half of the diorama. Not worth it. I don't think either of these make any sense to buy. Again, if you can come up with a reason in the comments below as to what these are for, because I don't understand what these are for. I don't get the point of them. But we can go one step further and go for the Rift Buster Mega Bundle, which is the 3 main sets and the dice bag and the rulebook. And even though you're spending £355, you are still only getting half of the limited edition miniature. Look here, you have to choose the American or the German one. If you're spending £355, if you're getting all of the bundle deals, and if it's the everything all-in mega pack, surely you should be getting both. Please give both. But if we toss up the prices of the different bits, 110, that's 220, 95, so that's 315, plus the rulebook is 355, so now we are at the 355 for there. So you get the dice bag for free, which I've already said I'm not a particular fan of, but if you're getting it free, that's fine. And then only half of the diorama, you only get to pick one of those. Is that worth it? Is buying all of this stuff all at once? It doesn't seem to be very much of a deal. There doesn't seem to be any more of a discount than you would get for buying just the starter set. Honestly, it almost seems like I would rather buy the starter set 3 times. If I bought the starter set 3 times, it would be less than 35. It would less than £300. It'd be 285. I would get 3 linebacker mechs, which is 3 linebacker mechs. I would get 36 Fireflies, which is more than you're getting here. You would get 6, 12, 18 the Stahltruppen, which is more than you get here. You get 3 of the same sculpts of each of the platoon commanders, which is a bit boring, but at least you could kind of paint them slightly differently and use them as NCOs, I guess. Whereas here you would be getting the different sculpts and you would be getting the special sculpts. You'd be getting 3 paperback rulebooks rather than 1 paperback and 1 hardback rulebook. And you'd getting 3 sets of this terrain, which probably would do you for a whole board. What you wouldn't get is the different models. So you wouldn't get the Stuart, you wouldn't get the Panzer IV, and you wouldn't get the Stahltruppen. Nachtalben. Well, if you've managed to get this far into this very long video of me talking numbers at you, well, firstly, thank you, but also you must be nearly as nerdy as I am. And you can express your nerdery in the comments to point out anything that I may have missed, any kind of alternate way of looking at things that makes certain aspects that I've looked at are kind of better or not as nice as even I've made out them to be. And I am aware that the way that I've been comparing stuff today is like a very specific way to look at it. I'm trying to compare the models kind of from different companies in as close to an equivalent way in terms of their manufacturing costs, but also in terms of what you're actually getting in terms of numbers and in terms of options and in terms of quality. And I think I've done a relatively good job, but it's certainly impossible to make exact comparisons like that. But it has been mentioned to me that I don't shill myself nearly as much as I should. And given that there is a big and expensive release of models coming out soon, I should probably do that. And so if you really want to, and it's only if you actually have interest in doing this, there is a PayPal donation link in the comments section below. I also have my painting handle is mentioned in a link in the description, and that's something that you can go and have a look at. I do a lot of my painting on these. I've been using them for several years now, and I think they're a really good idea. And so if you really like me talking about Konflikt 47 and you want me to talk more about Konflikt 47, those options are definitely a good idea to make sure that I keep buying models so I can talk about them even more. But I'm actually already definitely going to be buying some of the Konflikt 47 release. If I was sensible, and that sentence may kind of lean you into the idea that I'm maybe not being sensible, but if I was sensible, I would get the Konflikt 47 starter set. Because, as I mentioned earlier on in the video, I think this is a good deal. I think for what you're getting, the collection of models, the rules, the dice, for £95, I think that's a pretty good purchase. But if we look at the Riftbuster Mega Bundle, yeah, this has the starter set edit, which we know is a good deal, and this has the American Army bundle, which is also, we said, is a fairly good deal. And it has the Axis bundle, which we said wasn't necessarily as good. And then £40 for the hardback rulebook is pretty much one for one. There's no kind of extra deal there. But you are getting, I think it's £10 off the separate price, and so the dice bag is free. But I have noticed two things about this that's relevant to the Riftbuster Mega Bundle that is not relevant to the starter set. Number one is the reloading diorama. Now, as I was recording my first section of the video here, I was under the impression that no matter what bundle you get, you have to choose, it's just behind my webcam here, which half of the diorama you want. So you can either choose the American reloading guy or the German reloading guy. But actually, I think it works slightly differently from that. Because if you spend more than £200, you get the diorama, and if what you're buying includes the rulebook, you get an additional one of each model. So I think that if I was to buy this one with the American officer, I get one of the German officer, one of the diorama base, and two of the American officer. I think. Now, I'm going to go with that assumption. That is how other people read this as well. And if that's what turns up, that's great. Hopefully that is what turns up, because I kind of like me a little diorama every now and again. I'd definitely paint them up. I'm not sure if I'd actually put them on the permanently on this base, or if I want to put them on their own separate bases, but we can discuss that when I get it, if I get it. The other thing of note is Rift dice. So this game, Konflikt 47 in 2nd edition, is going to use Rift dice quite extensively, and as of recording, we haven't had good information about what Rift dice really do. It seems to be that they'll go in the dice bag, pulled randomly, and then you can assign them to units to power them up. But exactly how that works, we don't know. You are going to want some amount of Rift dice And the starter set here contains 8 Rift dice, 4 for each side. Whereas if I get the Rift Buster Mega bundle, the Americans and the German army includes 5 more of each side. So that means 9 of each side, which I think is probably enough to get started with. If you're running a purely Konflikt47 Rift Tech army, then maybe you need more than that. But Konflikt47 has always been this kind of bring a bolt action army and throw in some Rift Tech units for fun. So maybe you only have 3 or 4 or 5 or even up to 9. I think that having 9 Rift dice is pretty much going to sort me out. And if I do have to buy a box of dice eventually someday, well, it's probably because I'm playing the game a lot and it's probably worth supporting in that case. So there is one other correction that I want to make, and that's to do with the linebacker mech. Now, I've been calling this a large vehicle, and I've been calling the Vogelspinner a small vehicle. I think that I may have been a bit generous to the linebacker in this regard, and it's probably more like the Vogelspinner in terms of its overall size. Just toning down how much I'm weighting the linebacker in my discussion earlier probably would be a good idea. It's probably better to consider this a light vehicle in the same way that the Vogelspinner is a light vehicle. Well, I should probably end this video at some point because I've just been talking your ear off forever. So, as I've kind of alluded to, starter set I think is a good deal. American bundle I think is a good deal. The Rift Buster Mega bundle contains the good deals, but isn't necessarily any better a deal itself. And probably you shouldn't be getting the Rift Buster Mega Bundle because, good grief, that's just a lot of stuff. I think most people go for the starter set, get started playing, and kind of work from there is a much more sensible idea. And it's what I should be doing if I was sensible. But clearly, I am not. But as I've said several times, comments in the comments below, description in the description below with links to my PayPal and my painting handle, so you can have a look at that if you are interested in that. But for now, I'm ED-SKaR, always will be, and thank you very much for watching.